Hi. So it's so good to be back today with our guest, Leon R. Walker Jr. It's been an amazing conversation that I've had the great opportunity of speaking with him regarding the topic of divorcing a narcissist. Leon is an author, he's a mentor, and he's also a speaker. And he does very well in this topic of narcissism as he is a self described narcissist himself. Today, we're going to continue with our conversation what to expect when divorcing a narcissist, specifically Leon's interaction and his experience with his parents getting divorced when he was younger. So, we're going to jump right in and speak with Leon. All right. Hi, Leon. It's so good to be back here with you.
Hi, Toy. How you doing? Good to be back. That's right.
Yes, we had a lot of good conversation the last time regarding what to expect when divorcing a narcissist. And I can't wait to go over the remaining part of our conversation today. So thanks for being back with me.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I know that we had discussed a little bit about your experience growing up with your parents divorcing, and I kind of wanted to just hear that story if you would be so kind and giving us some insight with that.
Yeah, the reason why it stuck with me is because my parents used to fight and argue a lot. And so that became my norm. I expected it when I came home. When my dad would pull up in the driveway from work, I would get nervous and pee on myself.
Wow.
I love my dad dearly back then and even now. And he died in 1999 from alcoholism. So he worked hard at Ford Motor Company for 31 years and retired in 1991. But it was like we saw parents, you know what? We saw adults fighting in our neighborhood all the time, mothers and fathers, husbands and wives. And it was like scary, but it became a norm. But I was still affected by it. And my body would react when I hear my mother and father arguing.
Well, it's always different when it's your parents, much different from seeing others fighting, but when it's your own parents and being right there in the
Yeah.
midst of it.
And I've seen my mother get punched in the mouth. I've seen her teeth get broken. I've seen my father choke my mother. I've seen a lot, and I was always fearful when my dad come home. But my mother was tough and she stood up to him. So that made him want to fight even more. But the divorce, I remember being in the sixth grade and coming home from my sixth grade graduation, had my little suit on, my little certificate. And I was going to go in the house and change my clothes into my play clothes and go outside and play. My mother said, no, you can't go back in. And I looked at the door at the house and it was a red sticker that said eviction notice.
Wow.
Never forget that. And that morning was the last time I was ever in that house.
Oh,
And
my goodness.
my mother, my brother, and my sister were in front of the house. And as I came from my graduation, I made a turn right on our street and I looked down our street and I saw things in front of our house. I'm like, that was odd. It wasn't a garbage day. So the closer I got, I started seeing our beds on the lawn, clothes baskets. And I'm like, and I felt myself change at that moment at like 11, 12 years old. Hatred, fear, disconnect, discard, not wanting to be married, not wanting to have kids, all in that moment. And so my mother pulled the basket out. She said, here, you take this basket. And my mother and sister and brother started walking up the street. And I had still had on my little clothes from school. And I grabbed the basket and we started going up the street. My father had left prior to that. So I knew the divorce was in progress, but I didn't know when we were going to be leaving the house. Of course, we didn't have any lights. We didn't have water, gas. We didn't have a telephone. So we were using extension cords from our house to the neighbor's house. And then my sister and I were going from our house across the street to fill up jugs of water to take a bath from a pot at night. We put the pots on the hot stove, two little hot plates, warm it up, and then we took a bath like that. And that was probably months. And so I got used to that. So as I got older, it was like my empathy was already gone at that point. And so I looked at things as far as being rough in life, easy for me. Being rough, having hard times, dealing with hard times with my norm. So when I met women that would cry and be like, Leon, why don't you love me? Why don't you care? It was because of my childhood. lost my ability to care. The empathy was gone. The sympathy was gone. The love, there was no love. I was always running, and so I dealt with that in those harsh situations. That became my life, my lifestyle. I always wanted to be harsh, hard, aggressive. I didn't want to, the good things in life didn't appeal to me. I would win an award, get promoted. It was like the happiness didn't last long because of my childhood. Because once I come home from school and my parents are out, my mother's out in front with my brother and sister, and I get my buggy to pull up the street. That was it. It was like we out the house. That was discard. It was like disconnect, like emotionally attached. All of that started then, and I remember it. Almost to the day. And so my father was gone. We didn't have any utilities. We didn't have any money. We barely had food. I was stealing from the grocery store. I was stealing from corner stores. I became a thief as well to feed myself.
Wow.
So survival instinct started when I was like 11 years old, and I wasn't going to let it go. So I was going to survive by any means necessary. If that meant breaking a woman's heart before she broke my heart, yeah, I'll do it. If that meant stealing something to feed myself, yeah, I'll do it. If that meant cheat and lie to not have to be reminded of my past pain, yeah, I'll do it. So if that meant deflecting, running away from love, running away from relationships, not being committed, I was going to do it because the pain of my childhood was just too severe.
Yeah.
And so the divorce ruined me for a very long time.
So when you're saying the divorce, you're really talking about the separation at that point, correct? Because they weren't necessarily divorced at that point, but they were separated. Was there a point where they did kind of like recommune and?
No. Well, to me, it didn't matter whether it was separation or divorce. It was in,
as a child. That's of course, yeah.
Right. It was happening. And so I knew my father was leaving. I knew he was gone. I knew my friends would laugh at me. I knew they were separated. I knew my dad had another apartment somewhere else. I knew I wouldn't see my dad for a while. I knew my dad wouldn't make it to my football games, wrestling practice, none of that. And so it didn't matter whether it was divorce or separation. He was gone.
Yeah.
And so I dealt with that pain. And a child shouldn't have to deal with or experience or even hear the word divorce. And I wind up like 31 years later doing it to my own kids.
Wow. Wow. I just wanted to say that I can certainly relate to you in regards to, seeing what the kids go through. I too, as you know, went through a divorce. We went through separation and divorce. Actually, there was no separation. My husband just stopped coming home on a regular basis, stopped paying the bills, stopped bringing food home, stopped, in addition to that, just stopped the emotional support and caring for both myself as well as the children. And so I did see my kids go through a really tough time emotionally. And, in all sense of the word, I can still say that they do still to this day deal with some of that. I guess it's called PTSD, just still dealing with some of those same emotions and feelings and that they dealt with back then. And it's been about 7 years now. So, yeah. So you were going to say that, go on. What were you going to say next?
So it wasn't a matter of, it wasn't, to me, it wasn't a difference. It was separation. He's gone. My dad's gone. My mom doesn't have money. My mom can't take care of us. We don't have anywhere to live. And I was sent to live with a lady that I didn't know. And my mother and brother moved to a hotel. And my sister was sent with a woman she didn't know. So
did you have resentment for your parents, or how did you feel towards them specifically?
It wasn't them. I had resentment towards my mother because I blamed her for everything, which I guess you could say intuitively or directly. I blame every woman moving forward in my life for thinking about hurting me by mistake or direct, whatever the case was, whatever the case was.
Is there a reason why you blamed your mom more so than your dad?
Yeah, because I didn't know that my dad was doing what he was doing. My mother divorced him for a reason. I found out years later that he was mentally abusive, according to the divorce papers. So I didn't see those things. I saw my dad as a superhero. I saw my dad as a strong black man. I saw my dad as a provider, a protector. He could box, but he was loud. He was aggressive. He had a very extreme, outgoing personality, and he was very social. So I didn't know what my mom was dealing with my dad. I knew my mom, she would have the birthday parties. She would have the Halloween parties. She would set things up for Christmas. I knew my dad paid the bills. I knew he worked. My mom worked. She worked at bars. My father didn't like my mother working at bars. So I blame my mother for everything, which I was dead wrong. And I didn't realize that I was wrong until I was 47 years old.
Right.
And another 35 years after they had gotten divorced. And so through those years of me being upset with my mother, I was always upset with the women that I dated, because I said, if my mother can discard me, if my mother can break up a family, you're going to do it too. So guess what? Before that all happens, I'm going to discard you. I'm going to hurt you, and I'm going to break up this family before you break it up. So I had to be in control of my own pain and agony. And as opposed to another woman being in control of it, like I thought my mother was in control of my father's pain and agony and him being discarded. But no, he had something to do with it too. And years later, I would realize I had something to do with my divorce and my breakups as well.
Mm-hmm. So after they separated, Leon, then what was their interaction like? Just in regards of, really just kind of getting towards the divorce, the divorce itself, or the separation itself. What was their interaction like, just so that we can provide some sort of insight to our listeners as to what they can expect in regards to that relationship or non-existence of a relationship between your mom and dad at that time when things were just crazy enough?
So my mother wound up hating my dad. She would tell me, "You sound like your father. You walk like your father. You talk like your father." And she would look me in my eyes like, "You just, And so there was nothing in between the years of 1979 and 1999. They got divorced in 79. My father died in 99. There was no contact. The year before he died, my mother moved into my father's house. My sister had her move in because she had nowhere to live. But at that time, my dad was already kind of incapacitated. So he was sick and he was dying. So he didn't really know or recognize my mom did, but he didn't. And so the years from when they started the divorce until it was final, we didn't hear anything about it. We knew that there was a process. My mother, once we left the house and I was sent to live with another lady, about a year or so, I moved back with my mom, my brother, my sister. She got an apartment. It was a one bedroom. It had a kitchen, bathroom, and a little small dining room, which was turned into a bedroom for my brother. And my sister and I slept on the floor from the 7th grade. And so there was no interaction with my mom and dad. I'm glad it wasn't, because whenever they did interact, from what I know as a child, punches being thrown, and she was being choked, and she was shooting my dad, trying to kill my dad. So I didn't want them to interact.
And this was all in front of the children, in front of you guys?
Well, the punching and slapping and arguing, yes. But when she tried to kill him, she was at work. He went to her job. She was a bartender, and he didn't like her bartending. So he went in there and slapped her, and she put out a 38. Pow, pow, pow. Shot at him 6 times. She didn't hit him, but yeah, she tried.
Wow.
So, yeah. And so when we moved back with my mother, 7th and 8th grade, I came home one day. My mom said, you guys are going to court today. Be prepared. Your dad's coming to get you. And I'm like, okay. So I didn't know what to expect. I'd never been to court. I was 12 to 13 years old. Okay. We go to court, and the judge is like banging on the table. Who do you want to live with? Who do you want to live with? And he kept repeating. And I'm like, I want to live with, like, they're divorced, young man. And I remember him saying that.
Wait, I'm sorry. It broke up. What was your answer to when he asked you, who do you want to live with?
He said, who do you want to live with? I said, I want to live with both my parents. And he said, they're divorced. It's not going to happen. And I'm a old white man looking in my eyes, like, and so he made a decision, because my mother didn't show up to court that day. Oh. So my father got custody. He was awarded custody of my sister and I, and they deemed my mother unfit, which I never saw my mother as unfit, but the court system said she.
And she didn't show up.
Didn't show up. So that was more of a discard to me. She didn't. From 8th grade to 9th grade is a graduation in Cleveland, Ohio. So my mother didn't show up to my graduation, neither did my dad. And I was like, okay, no big deal. So my fatherly instincts were kind of like, I didn't want to be a dad, and I didn't want to be a husband. So I saw great examples as a child. Don't get me wrong. My uncles, my father was a great husband.
Right.
But as they got older and divorce started, all I remember is how bad it was to be a father or a husband. It was just rough. Yeah. You broke, you paying child support, and I've seen all of that. And so she didn't show up to court, and that was it. We moved my dad. I stayed in high school, went to a junior high school, went to another high school, but I was like maybe 10 miles away. Whereas when I was staying with my mother, I was like maybe 2 miles away. So increased distance, instead of catching one bus to school, I had to catch two or three now. So everything changed. Living with my mom from 7th and 8th grade, I didn't have any school clothes. The bills were being paid, but it just wasn't good. And moving my dad, which first thing he did was take us to the thrift store, the Goodwill. And I thought that was beautiful because I hadn't had a new pair of pants in 2 years. And so I was happy shopping at the Goodwill. And I still shop at the Goodwill, even at 57. So that was something that touched my heart. It felt good. My dad bought me school clothes. He cares. I got t-shirts. I got underwear. I got some cool shoes, you know? Yeah. So that's when it started. Then I started working and started being on my own at like 12 and 13, even with my dad. So I became very independent, removed from any type of want or need or desire for a relationship, need or desire to depend on a woman aside from sex.
It was more just survival.
Yeah, it was survival and sex. It wasn't hugs. It wasn't cuddling. It wasn't kissing. It was kissing. It wasn't holding hand. It wasn't being fruitful and hopeful. It wasn't being loving and caring. All that was gone from my body, from my mind, from my spirit. I didn't care. I didn't have empathy. I didn't know how to love. And so hence the narcissism began.
Yeah, it began then. And then you said that, so we already know that you went in, then shortly after that, you went into the military after you graduated from high school. And did that play a role in your choice of direction as far as careers?
Oh yeah, I wasn't going to college. I never took the SAT. My GPA coming out of high school was like a 1.8. I wasn't paying attention to school. I did just enough to get by.
Yeah.
Taking ASVAB, Armed Service Vocational Aptitude and Battery Exam to get into the military. I took it 5 times. I failed it 4 times because, being molested and raped and being addicted to women and porn, I couldn't concentrate in school. All I thought about was women, their body parts, and sex. So I was very lackluster when it came to education. Yeah. So I said, you know what? I'm not going to college. I'm not going to start this over. I know I can't concentrate in school. I don't even know how smart I am. I thought I was dumb. So I passed the military exam by 1 point, and boom, I go into the military with this preconceived notion which was true. I travel, I get to meet and sleep with exotic women. I have some money in my pocket, and that resonated me with quite well. And so nothing else was important to me.
And then also, I think that young men and women view the military as having a secondary family or sometimes a primary family when you become, I'm not sure if this is the truth, but.
True. And no, it's the truth. It was a secondary family for me. I had big brothers, I had uncles, I had men that were father figures. And so these were men. Matter of fact, what made it better for me were these were men that were just as whorish as I was. They were just as dysfunctional as I was. Most of them, back then, some of them come to the military out of jail. They come from orphanages. They come from foster care. They come from prison. They come from broken homes. So we all we related to one another. And it was like, oh, I understand you. You just as jacked up as I am. You have addictions too. So I was like, cool. There was a trauma bond.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if I can be honest, my son he's 19 and he's looking to go into the military as well. He has failed the ASVAB once, and then another time, the second time he passed it, but he wanted to go back for a higher grade or a higher score, I guess. That's a whole different story because we're kind of upset with the recruiter. The recruiter shouldn't have sent him back to, right. If he had passed and then he got a lower grade the next time that he did the first time. So, but I do feel like I feel so sad for my son sometimes because I know that he's just still dealing with so much of the experience of growing up in our very toxic family towards those ends.
But Toy, you have to make him reach out to a man that's familiar with everything that he's gone through, his childhood, a man that's familiar with his parents being divorced. If not, he's going to be stuck. Yeah. The women sometimes, you have me. Y'all have me. I've done everything that
I appreciate you saying that. Truly, I do. And because you said that, I am going to take you up on it. I promise you.